and during his same time here. So, can we go to the next one again? There, David. Okay. All right. So we're not going to talk about Jeremiah tonight. We're going to look at some of the other earlier businesses in town. And as I looked at some of those different businesses, I came to decide that everybody was related, because you could look at all these different ones, and the board of directors all had the same names on them, and then when you looked further into that, they were all married to each other. And so, the subtitle for tonight is The Titans of Dover, or Everyone is Related. So we're going to start with the family of John Dice. My mouse doesn't like me tonight. There we go. So the family of John Dice is kind of our connector to all of this. As I was working on my research, I had this great big piece of paper, and he was at the top, and all the lines connected to him. I thought about taking a picture of it and including it on here, but it was kind of the crazy thought processes of my mind, so I decided not to put that on there. But we're going to use him as the link to everything. From that family, we're going to look at these other prominent Dover families, including the Bakers, the Hardesties, the Kronzes, the Ferdings, and the Nugents, and then look at some of their businesses and occupations. So John Dice was born in Bavaria, Germany, came to the United States in 1836. He started out in New York City, and then he moved to Pensacola, Florida, and he was a shipping clerk in a fruit and vegetable company down there. He corresponded with friends that he had in Dover, and 2 different times he made the trip north on a flatboat up the Mississippi River, up the Ohio River to the Ohio Canal to Canal Dover, Ohio. On his second trip, he brought along sugar and coffee and molasses to sell to the people here, and he attended a camp meeting. Lo and behold, he met a lady while he was there. Her name was Salome Arnold. They were married in Tuscarawas County in 1840, and he stayed here. In 1849, he purchased the land that we know today as Dice Hill Park, and that's in the map, the orange area up there at the top. That was the farmland that he purchased. And then he built a farmhouse there in 1856. And in 1868, he moved to a home that was on 6th Street, and he gave the farm over to one of his sons, who also was named John. So the other map here shows the house, marked in yellow there. And it's actually just right over there. Had to find out where it was in the building. It's just catty corner from the library here. So that house is still standing. Right beside him lived one of his sons, and that house is also still standing, but it got moved from 6th to 7th Street. So it's also still there. After he moved to the house in town, he started in the tinware business. Eventually, a couple of his sons joined him there. And in 1878, he built another home on 3rd Street at 126 West 3rd, which is right near Grace Lutheran Church. We're going to see a picture of that here in a little bit because it connects us to something else. He lived until 1894. So he and his wife had 7 children. So from those 7 children, we start to make connections. So those 7 children were John, Andrew, Elizabeth, Philip, Daniel, Mary, and the oldest was Christian. Christian is our link to a lot of people, so we're going to skip him for now and move on to some of the younger ones. So we'll start with Philip. All right. Philip is first mentioned as following in his father's footsteps in the tinware business. And in 1873, he was running the largest tinware store in Tuscarawas County. He added furniture to the store as something that he started to sell. And eventually, with his brother Andrew, they operated the Dice Bisman Kurtz Manufacturing Company. So this building, I'll move the mouse to it here, it's right there, was located on the canal towpath between the canal and the river. And it was eventually destroyed in the 1913 flood of the river. His brother Andrew started the venture, but Philip was soon involved with it, and their business partners were Isaac Kurtz and Christian Bisman. Couldn't find out much about them, other than Isaac Kurtz owned farmland between Dover and New Philly. If you look at the map, study it a lot, you can eventually figure out, if you know where the Muskingum Conservancy building is there on 3rd Street, that's about where the Kurtz farm was located. At its height, this manufacturing company employed about 200 men and made all types of furniture from black walnut, cherry, oak, and it specialized in mahogany cafe bars. So a lot of the hotel bars in the area, I'm sure, had a bar from the Dice Bisman Kurtz company. They brought in many skilled cabinet makers from Germany to make custom cabinets. And according to the 1887 Tuscarawas County Business Directory, the business was made up of 2 4-story buildings and a 2-story building on 3 acres of ground, so all right there along the canal and the river. The machinery to make the furniture was propelled by an 80-horsepower engine and a boiler. The fine-grade chamber and dining room suits produced by the firm ranged in price from $30 to $600, and the company in 1887 was doing an annual business of nearly $100,000. At that point in time, Philip was the traveling salesman, Bisman was the superintendent and general manager, and Kurtz was the secretary and treasurer, and Andrew was no longer associated with the firm by 1887. A 4th partner had come in, though, F. Weibel, who managed the retail department. So the buildings were on each side of the canal, and so there was a bridge that was built to connect them. And this picture up here is a picture from 1895 when the bridge collapsed down into the canal. Fell onto a boat, as you can see. Took over 24 hours to clear up the mess, and it stopped up the traffic along the canal for a couple of days until they got it cleared out. And then the other pictures on this slide show the building during the 1913 flood. On the bottom one, it's still standing there. It was part of the Dover Manufacturing Company at that point in time. And then in the top one, it eventually succumbed to the damage from the floodwaters. So the operators of the Dice Bisman Kurtz Company were also involved in the Weibel, Wentz and Company planing mill. And this is a picture, it's kind of hard to explain where it is. This is right across the Tuscarawas Avenue Bridge where the gas pump museum used to be, the building that was there. That's about the location of the dark building. And then this little light building right there beside it, you can see says the Wentz Lumber Company. So the Weibel Wentz Company had the planing mill. The managing members of this firm were Frank Weibel, Frederick Wentz, and Philip and Andrew Dice, and H. Krebs. In 1887, this enterprise employed 15 people and would take contracts for the construction of both public and private buildings. And they carried dressed and undressed lumber, lathe, shingles, pickets, posts, and general building materials. This one eventually becomes the Weibel Egg Company in 1891. And in 1905, the Wagner brothers, William and Peter, took over the stock of the company and formed the Wagner Lumber Company. So here's a picture of the Wagner Company from the 1908 atlas. Andrew Dice remained a shareholder in this business and served as the president of the board. Now we could go off on a tangent about the Wagner family, but we're not going to do that. But just so you know, they founded the town of Peral, and so it's either 1900 or 1901. So they have a lot more connections. So we might talk about them in another one of these things, but not today. Philip moved to Washington, D.C. in the 1890s, and he had a firm in New Alexandria, Virginia with F. Weibel for a time. But Andrew stayed here in Dover, lived out his 94 years here, and had his hand in some other ventures. There was some interesting lawsuits involving Philip and Andrew Dice when he was in Virginia. Couldn't quite piece together what exactly that story was, but there was some bickering, it looked like, as to the businesses in both places, but eventually the one in Dover closed. In the 1890s, Andrew had his hand in a new business. There was an inventor named Hawkins. This is what I could find out about this guy. An inventor named Hawkins who came to town, and he was able to manufacture a nail puller, and they used the furniture manufacturing store there along the canal to manufacture the nail puller. They named the company the Big Four Company, and for a couple years manufactured the nail puller. Andrew also served as the president of the State Savings Bank, and this bank began in 1904. There is a photo of it. It was on Factory Street. And then there's a list of its board of directors, which some of these names we're going to see again. Board of directors include James Slingliff, which Slingliff and Deardorff founded Dover. Joseph C. Miller, Oliver Toomey, you might have heard of Samuel Toomey, his father who manufactured carriages, Harry Ream, George Kreitz, Edward File, Dr. O.S. Welty, John Kirch, J. William Fritz, and Sidney S. Brister were all on the board of directors. Joseph Miller was Andrew Dice's brother-in-law. They married sisters named Esther and Elizabeth Lenhart. So, related. Andrew was also associated with some of his brother Christian's businesses, which we're going to look at a little bit, but here's just the list of his business interests. So you had the Dice Bisman Company, Big Four, the State Savings Bank, and then we also have the Dice Ferding Wholesale Grocers. He served as a director at the Invincible Manufacturing Company, which made vacuum cleaners. He had an interest in the Dover Manufacturing Company, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and the Reeves Steel and Manufacturing Company. So his hand was in a lot of different things. And I'm sure if I looked hard enough, I could find you another list, probably that long, that he was involved in those board of directors too. But he was also known as a philanthropist. And he was very involved in the Dice Memorial YMCA that was built on Tuscarawas Avenue. This building is still standing. He donated the land that was worth $25,000, donated another $75,000 to help with the cost of building it. And then upon his death, he left money in his will for the operation of the YMCA. The cornerstone was laid after Andrew's death on April 8th, 1928. And he was one of the largest holders of land in the Dover area at the time of his death. So then we're going to go back to the oldest brother, Christian. Christian was born in 1843 in Tuscarawas County. When he was 18, he enlisted in Company E of the 80th Volunteer Infantry, served in the Civil War. He served for 4 years and fought at Mission Ridge, Corinth, and Vicksburg. He participated in the siege of Atlanta and in Sherman's March to the Sea. He was commissioned a captain, and he was mustered out of service at the end of the war. And he participated in the Grand Review in Washington, D.C., which this is a picture of the officers of the 80th. It says the State House in Washington, D.C., so I would assume the Capitol. And looking at the old pictures, looking at this one, these guys aren't identified, but I think this one right here, underneath the cursor, I think that one is Christian, looking at what he looks like when he got a little bit older. In October of 1865, he married Rosanna Harbold, and they had 4 children, Calvin, Charles, Adelaide, and Clara. He started out the tin business with his brother Philip after the war, and then in 1878, he established the Dice Ferding Wholesale Grocery Company. So here is a picture. This is pretty early on because this is 3rd Street in Dover. This is the corner of 3rd and Tuscarawas Avenue, so those other buildings are heading east down 3rd Street. So today there's a lot bigger buildings in that area than what's in this picture. And they were testing the new fire pumper in this picture to see if it could reach to the top of the building. You see a couple guys standing on the top of the building. So this was a big 3-story building on the corner of what was then called Factory Street and 3rd Street. And his business partner was Samuel Ferding. Oh, there's the building. That's the building today. So we can kind of compare them. There it was in the early, that was probably late 1800s. Then we go to the building today on the corner. So his business partner was Samuel Ferding. Samuel Ferding was born in Lancaster County in 1812 and came to Tuscarawas County in 1826 at age 14. And his first job in Dover was as the toll collector on the bridge. There was a bridge that was a little bit east of where the Tuscarawas Avenue Bridge is today, and you had to pay to cross the bridge. So he started out as the toll collector on the bridge. In 1837, he went into the grocery business and succeeded a man named A.G. Phillips. And then he was also appointed the collector, the port collector on the Ohio Canal. So this is a picture of the toll house along the canal after the flood. So it's not in very good condition. You can see the canal was washed out at this point. But it actually says collector's office, if you could see that on the little building. So that's one of my favorite pictures of the toll booth along the canal. The portrait and biographical record of Tuscarawas County that was written in 1895 says of Samuel, in practical ways, he has supported all public improvements and contributed to the growth and development of the city. Samuel was married to Mary Elliott, who was the daughter of Captain Wilson Elliott, and together they had 8 children. Wilson Elliott's brother was a Navy captain by the name of J.D. Elliott, and his nephew was the person who ran the newspaper in New Philadelphia. Another connection. The 1887 Business Directory says this of the Dice Ferding Company. The premises occupied embraces a large 3-story and basement brick structure, 48 by 60 feet in dimensions, in which is carried at all times an extensive line of staples and fancy groceries, foreign fruits and nuts, coffees and teas, received from direct importations, foreign and native sugars, spices, canned and bottled goods, confectionaries, fine cigars and tobaccos, groceries, sundries, notions, etc. The company eventually expands. Did it change again? Okay, that's okay. The company eventually expanded and moved across the street. This building is where TV Specialties was located. So also on West 3rd Street. This building that's kind of blurred here a little bit was the Big 4 Opera House. And then right beside it was the Dice Ferding Company. So Christian Dice's daughter Clara and his partner Samuel Ferding's son George married one another. Related. George began working at the Dice Ferding Company in 1881 and became its general manager and president in 1914 after the death of his father-in-law Christian. In 1920, George founded the Dice Ferding Dairies, which operated 3 cheese factories, and from 1922 to 1926, the Dice Ferding Company Swiss cheese took grand champion at the Ohio State Fair. So here is, this is from a letterhead from 1928. You can see down at the bottom the manufacturers of the Defco high-grade Swiss cheese. In 1929, they started opening Defco grocery stores, but by 1930s, the Dice Ferding Company was gone and the grocery stores were gone. They had become the MK grocery stores. I think that the Dice Ferding Company was a victim of the Great Depression. I couldn't find newspaper articles that talked about when it closed. I used the city directories to look at the address. There were also articles about, by 1932, the rooms were used by the American Red Cross as sewing rooms for the women in the factory. And then by 1936, it was part of the stove department of the Reeves Manufacturing Company. So another connection, oh, I have a picture of the building today. And then the header above the door still says the Dice Ferding Company. So another connection to the Ferding family is the marriage of George's daughter and George's sister. Her name was Grace, and she married John C. Nugent. J.C. Nugent started out working in the Reeves rolling mill, but his real passion was acting. He started a local stage company at the mill, and he eventually took his family on the road, touring the country with theatrical groups, performing vaudeville. J.C. Nugent eventually appeared on Broadway and in more than 20 motion pictures. They had 2 children, Elliot and Ruth, and when those 2 were school age, they lived in Dover at their grandfather's grand home on Northwest Charles Avenue that was known as the Oaks. Elliot graduated from Dover High School. He went on to attend the Ohio State University, where he roomed with a talented young writer named James Thurber. Elliot acted, wrote, and directed plays on Broadway and in motion pictures. The picture on the right, the older one, if you can read the caption, it says, "The Oaks, Canal Dover, residence of Mr. and Mrs. J.C. Nugent and Master Elliot and Baby Ruth." I thought it was kind of fun that they called her Baby Ruth at that same time. And then this is a picture of Elliot Nugent and then his mother, Grace Ferding Nugent. So we're going to go back to Christian's family again. Look at his daughter. This next link within industry is kind of a big one. Christian's daughter Adelaide married Arthur J. Krantz in October of 1899, and A.J. Krantz's ties to business in Dover are many, as he was business partner with Samuel and Jeremiah Reeves. So we do bring the Reeves family into it a little bit. The green boxes show Adelaide in a graduation picture from the First World War when they were raising money. So AJ's list of business ties are many. It includes the Secretary and Treasurer of the Reeves Manufacturing Company, the second Vice President of the Reeves Banking and Trust Company, the Secretary of the Union Lumber Company, the Secretary of the Dover Manufacturing Company, and President of the Dover Forge and Iron Company. Kranz's obituary states, A.J. Kranz was an industrialist who was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He came up through the ranks in the steel industry that for years was the city's lifeline. He financially supported many community undertakings, and he likewise helped many individuals, but also insisted upon anonymity. He started working at the Reeves Mill. This was the Reeves Rolling Mill. The Reeves family sold it in 1900 to a subsidiary of U.S. Steel, the American Sheet and Tin Plate Company. And this was located where the GE buildings, that they just recently tore down, were located. He started there in the early 1890s when he was 17 years old, and he became an executive firm in 1900 when the rolling mill was sold. So he became a partner in the Reeves Steel Manufacturing Company. So here's an early photo. You can see the Reeves on the smokestack of the Reeves Steel Manufacturing Company. The Reeves Bank was formed in 1903 with AJ on its board of directors. These are interior photos of the back of the bank from the 1908 atlas. And then here's a picture of the bank today on 3rd Street. The Union Lumber Company was also formed in 1903. And this was started by James Reese, who was the brother-in-law of Jeremiah Reeves. Everyone is related. That was a busy year as the Dover Forge and Iron Company was also started. And this was started by A.J. Kranz with his partners J.A. Kranz, his brother, Fred Bernhardt Sr., who was a local brewer, Ambrose Beard, and banker Charles F. Baker. Remember that name. They manufactured boiler tubes and other specialized iron products. And by 1907, the operation had 10 puddling furnaces, which created wrought iron or steel from pig iron. The Forge and Iron Company merged with the Reeves Manufacturing Company in 1912. So it's located in that same general area. And then the Dover Manufacturing Company was started by Charles T. Johnson in 1899 to manufacture asbestos sat irons. And AJ was on the board of directors. The Dover Manufacturing Company started out with the sat irons that you put on your stove and heated up that way. They eventually made electric appliances also, and the Lady Dover was one of the better known ones of those. Eventually became the Monarch Company. So with the marriage of AJ and Adeline Dice, the link was made to the best known industrialist in Dover's history. Next child is Calvin Dice. Calvin Dice also links the Dice family to the Baker family. So Calvin ran the Dice Time Shop, and he married Helen DeGrief. Helen DeGrief's mother was Loretta Baker DeGrief. So there's the connection to the Baker family. Calvin began in the jewelry business in 1897 when he was 24 years old and learned the trade from a jeweler named Frederick Richardson. So we're going to look a little bit at the Baker family. So the first Baker to come to Tuscarawas County came in 1815. He was Philip Baker Sr. He settled in Blicktown, which is the west end of New Philly, dammed the river and set up the first flour mill in Tuscarawas County. His son, Philip Baker Jr., began his working career in the foundry business, and according to the I think it's the 1887 Business Directory, by industry and economy, he succeeded in saving money enough to start the first bank in Dover, P. Baker and Sons, in 1867. This eventually became known as the Exchange Bank. So the Exchange Bank was located on West 3rd Street. And the 1887 Business Directory describes the firm as a regular banking business transacting in the purchase of bonds and loans, deposits, collections, and exchange with correspondents in the principal cities in the Union. And yet another related connection, Philip Baker Jr. married Harriet Elliott, who was the sister of Samuel Ferding's wife, Mary. You can see why my lines got so entangled as I was figuring all this out. So Philip's daughter, Loretta, connects the family to the Dices, and then his daughter, Mary, connects the family to the Hardistys. These are a couple other pictures of the Exchange Bank, the inside, and then in this picture, this is where the Exchange Bank is located. And if you notice up here, the dice block. Okay, so Mary, daughter Mary Baker, connects us to the Hardistys. Mary Catherine Baker married Alonzo Hardisty in 1870, and Alonzo and his brother William had taken over their father Thomas's flour mills in Dover. The company had 3 mills altogether, and they had come from a long line of millers. The Dover City Mills are the top yellow dot. Those were originally built in 1842 by Nathaniel Hayden and Elijah Welty. They were destroyed by fire in 1859 and rebuilt in 1860. And then the Hardisty family acquired those mills in 1866. The lower mill was known as the Cascade Mill. So here's a picture of the city mills. These are basically in the parking lot of the flea market along Tuscarawas Avenue, was where they were located. In 1872, it was said of the firm, the mill has 3 run of stone and a capacity of 100 barrels of flours per day. Christian Deerdorf, the founder of Dover, then erected the other mill. Here's one more picture of that one. And then this parking lot today. All right, so Deerdorf's mill was located along the towpath. When he died in 1851, when Christian Deerdorf died in 1851, the mill was sold to Edmund Burnett, who sold it in 1870 to Genson Parr, who then the Hardisty brothers purchased it in 1872. So that one has kind of a long line of owners. It was described as having 3 run of stone and a 50 barrel per day capacity. This is a picture of the mill during the 1913 flood. In the Reminiscences of Dover book, it is said of the Hardisty Mills in 1879, the 3 mills run on 12 burrs and have a capacity of 400 barrels every 24 hours. In the previous 6 months from the report, they had purchased 241,000 bushels of wheat and produced over 47,000 barrels of flour. Their signature brand of flour at that time was the new processed flour. They were planning to buy a new coreless engine of 180 horsepower, which would cost over $3,000. The coreless engine had remained famous at the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876. Alonzo Hardisty died in 1892, the result of a fall down a shaft in the mill, and Joseph C. Miller became the manager of the Hardisty Mills after Alonzo's death. Now, you may recall that name as one of the directors of the board of the State Savings Bank and the brother-in-law of Andrew Dice. Everyone's related. In a 1937 article in the Daily Times, Joe Miller recalled the canal boats bringing wheat to the mill from Navarre, Bolivar, Tuscarawas, Lock 17, Port Washington, Newcomerstown, West Lafayette, and Canal Louisville. In 1913, the flood put an end to the canal, but trucks and railroad freight cars continued to bring wheat. The well-known Hardisty brands in 1937 were Peerless Best and Peerless Cake Flour. The mill was purchased in 1949 by Robert Tanner, and the name was changed to the Dover Milling Company, and it was closed in 1967, and the building was torn down at that point for the Eagles parking lot. I put this picture up. It shows the city mill here. The Cascade Mill would be over here on the other side of the furniture. But right here, you can see a canal boat. And if it stays on the right photo, there we go. Right here is a canal boat. So it kind of went along with the story of the canal boats bringing the wheat. So Philip Baker had 2 sons, Charles and Jesse. They were involved in the banking business. Jesse was described as a businessman who possessed sound principles, sterling integrity, and superior executive ability. He studied at Oberlin and worked his way through the ranks of the bank, first as a clerk, then the bookkeeper, and then the cashier. And he was also treasurer of the Tuscarawas County Agricultural Society. He died in 1914. And then Charles F. Baker was the other brother. He died in 1938, and at the time he was the longest serving banker in Tuscarawas County, having worked at the bank in some capacity for over 60 years. He was also on the board of directors of the Reeves Manufacturing Company. He was an avid sportsman, owned horses for harness racing, and he seemed to enjoy speed, as I often found his name in the newspaper getting arrested for being fined for speeding in his automobile. We're going to look at one more bank in town that makes another connection. This time the connection isn't by blood, but by address. So the last property owned by John Dice on West 3rd Street at 126 was purchased by banker Plin Vinton. Now, first of all, I just wanted to say his name when I found it was Plin Vinton because it's fun. But part of this is just the interconnectedness of the Dover businessmen in the early 1800s, or the late 1800s and the early 1900s. His family founded the Iron Valley Bank, which dates back to 1871. It was the partnership of Alvin Vinton, his son Flynn, and his son-in-law Joseph Stout. So along with banking, they were also involved in the insurance business. And in one more connection, Flynn Vinton's daughter Clara married Ernest Wentz, who was the son of Frederick Wentz, who was part of the Wentz lumber company that was associated with the Dice family. So to end this mix of the Dover families, we're going to look at one more business deal that was done in 1947. It was a three-way merger of banks that brought a whole slew of all these names together. The merger was among the Exchange National Bank, the First National Bank, and the State Savings Bank. So the new institution will be known as the National Bank of Dover. This building was where Chase Bank stands today. They took over the State Bank building to use at that point in time. So the merger was planned by D.C. Baker of the Exchange Bank, G.T. Brister of the State Savings Bank, and Alvin Lind of the First National Bank. D.C. Baker was the son of Jesse Baker. And on the board were E.A. Hardesty and Helen Dice. The First National Bank was started by Samuel Croxton, who was the uncle of Samuel Reeves' wife, Belle. And the original stockholders of the bank included Alonzo Hardesty, Christian Dice, Jeremiah Reeves, and Valentine Wentz, the father of Frederick Wentz. The State Savings Bank, of course, had Andrew Dice and Joseph Miller in its ranks. So all these names come together. There's more connections to be made. I couldn't get a clear picture of the Big Four Opera House. In Calvin Dice's obituary, he said he was a partner in it, but then another source said Christian was the partner. And then an article when it opened said it had three partners who were Jacob Horn, Joseph Biter, and Philip Schaefer, and they said the fourth one had been bought out and didn't give his name. So there is a connection there with the Big Four Opera House. And those, if we take those three men, Jacob Horn, Joseph Biter, and Philip Schaefer, we bring a whole nother spectrum of business connections in Dover. For one thing, Philip Schaefer started out as a carpenter of the Wentz, Dice, and Ink planing mill. So we put up these pictures too. The name Sidney Brister is another one that's frequented in the businesses in Dover. We can connect him to the founding of the Union Country Club with that. This is a picture of the Union Country Club. He got off the trolley and climbed all those steps. I don't know if you had your golf clubs on your back climbing all those steps or not. A lot of steps there. But the Country Club was founded by partners Sidney Brister, Negley, Oliver Toomey, A.J. Krantz, and George Ferding. Everybody's related. If we want to take the Brister name further, he married Samuel Toomey. His sister married Samuel Toomey's son, Oliver. So it all becomes related. That's the Brister, the Toomey up there. So one last picture. This picture is in the archives here at the library, and it was in the newspaper. I believe it was 1895. This is a picnic on Yankee Dan Island. Yankee Dan Island is just south of the White Bridge in the Tuscarawas River. It It was an island where lots of people went for picnics. Eventually it was owned by a club and people went there. So in this picture, gotta find my key. This is Andrew Dice. This is Charles Baker. This is Mrs. George Ferding. This is Mrs. S.J. Brister. This is Mrs. C.F. Baker. This is Oliver Toomey. This is S.J. Brister. This is Mrs. DeGrief. And this is George Ferding. So a lot of these titans of Dover are in this picture all together. So stay tuned. I think there's going to be another one with more lines. Connect more people together. Thank you for coming tonight. Anybody have any questions?
I was curious on that Toomey, that there was one, you know,
Yes.
if that was, did you come across if that was related to Linda Toomey that works here?
I think it's spelled different.
It's spelled
Yes.
different? Okay.
Yes.
So it's not the same spelling?
Yeah,
Okay.
Toomey.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
That real pretty Victorian house that you said was 126.
Yes.
What is there
That house is there.
It's near the parking lot of like the insurance agency that's right there beside the Grace Lutheran Church on 3rd Street.
It was different than what we saw.
It was torn down in,
On the west.
I think it was 1957, right around there. It was owned by the man who owned the Warm Drug Store at that point in time. But I think like I don't know if that's the Marburg or Insurance, and there's a parking lot right there. It's right in that area.
Hanhart.
Yeah.
Hanhart?
Yeah. So on the, south side of West 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate finally finding out on the Benton connection, because you and I both know, I mean, I'm always in Maple Grove Cemetery walking, and it's like with the mausoleum of Benton, I never knew what the family did, you
Yeah.
know, to acquire a large mausoleum in there, as far as, so I appreciate I never knew his banking.
Yeah, the Iron Valley Bank's where the Almond Museum,
Yeah.
the Almond TV Museum is.
No, the Nugent House, that was the one they tore down when they built the new school.
Yes. Yes.
So what did they pay the toll for? Was it,
The bridge was privately owned, I believe.
the bridge was?
Yeah, so you paid a toll to go across it,
The Tuscarawas?
over the river. Yeah, it was beside that one, a little bit further upstream, I guess you'd say. Wasn't in the exact spot where they eventually built the bridge.
Okay, thank you.
Was that the only bridge at the time, like
Yes.
one Dover to that way, not Dover that way?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was Yankee Dan's last name?
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman,
Yeah.
from Gregorsville? Zimmerman?
I believe he moved there after he was in Dover, so yes.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people don't know, you might know, because we've had this talk where the Wendy's Lumber Company was, where it ended up, which is where Wendy's is.
Yes.
Okay, and the pylons, those concrete pylons that are in the parking lot of that, you know, where the Holmes Lumber Company is now, is where it was extended. I think I told you that one time I saw that photograph, and I don't
I think it's
any-
almost on the street.
It was almost on the street,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was up on the pylons because of the canal. I think they had some issues, must have had some issues with some flooding or something,
Okay.
because it was always raised up, so. I don't know whether anybody ever gave me that photo or not. I just think myself, I never bought that.
I don't think I have that one.
Yeah, because it shows it actually coming out onto that.
Okay.
Who's, like, son, Ian, who's,
Yeah.
did break back.
Any more?
When you said that one guy made $100,000, that would be a
A
lot of money back.
Yeah. Dover was like the 3rd largest flower producing area in the nation at one point in time, that just blows my mind. There's stories about during the shower, they have runners that would go out the country roads and meet the farmers coming in with their wagons of wheat and make deals with them, coming in and then send. Yes.
The Bernhard Wentz Scholarship that is given out, is that the same Wentz?
I would assume, yeah. The Bernhardt was the brewer, and Wentz was the lumber company. And maybe next time I'll know if they're married. Somebody married one of them. Do you know that?
It's at the cemetery.
Okay.
When you go on the lower part, it's actually, because that was the mausoleum that they put
Samuel in
Reeves.
first.
Yeah,
Okay.
because before they had the mausoleum built, they put him, so there's where the connection as far as with the family. But yeah,
Okay.
once in the Bernhards, they were related.
They're good. Everybody's related.
Yeah. So and then the Spanish ballroom is
The Wentz building.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
The name sad iron always intrigued me. Sad iron, do you know how that?
I think because the women were sad they had iron.
I buy that.
That's how I feel about it. I don't know. I don't know why that's what they were called.
Maybe it stood for something.
Yeah.
In Crooked Run is one of the cheese houses that is the
Okay.
Ferding company. If you go to the property that is just past the church in Crooked Run, look back in there, it's built into the hillside.
Okay. Probably kept it cool.
Yeah, kept it cool. And those cheeses were marketed as gourmet cheeses from little old Tuscarawas County, Ohio.
I didn't think Defco sounded like a very appetizing.
No. And then the clam farm was built by Philip Baker, and I don't know if it was one or two.
Two.
Was it two?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was built by him, and then there was another farm that they built in Crooked Run also. FYI.
Okay. Fun connection.
Yep. Everybody's related.
Yeah.
What do we know about the Opera House? I'm not aware of hearing anything about that. Were there any famous people that were
Yeah.
there?
Do I have it? I have a lot of doodles. I'm trying to connect things. I don't know if I have. The Opera House was 1890s, I believe, was when it was originally opened. And then it showed, where it had live performances. I don't think it ever went to movies. There were other movie theaters then on Tuscarawas Avenue. But it became part of the Reeves Manufacturing Company Stoveworks by 1937 also. But I know the stage is still in there today. In that building. So I'd have to do a little more
And that's on,
digging.
is that on Tusk?
Yes, yes.
TV specialty.
No, Third Street.
Yeah.
It's on 3rd Street,
Third Street.
like TV specialty.
It's on Third Street.
Oh, I did.
Yep, back.
It was this part of the building.
Yeah. Mhm.
You can see it here in this one, it's fancier. Not a fancier front than what, but it's
Yeah.
like,
Yes. It's attached to the Ferding.
and if you,
Actually, if you go in, because we toured through it, there's actually still an old vaudeville poster that's on the wall that's kind of attached to
this one, this part here is like the stage, would have been the stage area on the back of the building.
says the future of space, right? Or it says the future of space is the future of our world. How many of you, if there was a person here giving away tickets to go to space, how many of you would go? Okay. If there was a person here that had a time machine and took us back to the early 1900s in downtown Dover, how many of you would buy a ticket to go on that trip? I think it would be really interesting. You know, we have vestiges of what used to be, and of course, as time goes on, unless we, unless people actually take the time and the money to invest in those properties, they disappear. But it would be fascinating, really, to go back at the different periods of time and see the activity, because we were a hub. You know, Canal Dover, I mean, let's face it, you know, and we had the steel and we had the flour mills, we had all kinds of things going on. I think it would be interesting to imagine what went on in our town. We can only get it from things like this. Thank goodness we have a person who loves to delve into this past and share it with us, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise, we would just be grasping at straws, right? Other questions, other comments?
You couldn't find anything on the Opera House, like where you said famous people or?
No, I didn't delve into that.
Okay, well, because I know Newcomers Town had a Opera
yeah.
House that did have famous people.
Yeah.
That were there, okay.
Yeah, Yorksville had one, Fort Washington had one. I think theirs still has all the signatures on the third floor of their town hall.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they have one. So, yeah.
They did a lot of work.
Yeah, because the entertainment came to us, you know, now if we want entertainment, we go, we have transportation to go to a place, but in those days, people didn't have, they weren't as mobile as we are, right? So we had, the transportation, or the entertainment came to us.
Yeah.
Are there any of the original homes of the Titans of Dover still standing?
Yes.
Besides the Reeves?
Yes, there are. And actually, I had some of them that I took the picture from Google Street View, but I didn't end up putting them in the program. But the Hardesty House is still on North Worcester Avenue, and Andrew and Christian Dice, I believe, both have homes on Worcester Avenue that are still there. So that's what I was thinking about, doing something sometime using the city directory and just going up North Worcester Avenue and talking about who lived in all those big houses.
Maybe we could do a walking tour.
Yeah.
Someday, you know, that would be fun.
Yes.
I live in a Baker house, it's on the corner of Third and Cross.
Okay.
And I think it was built by Charles.
Okay.
And I always say, Baker the banker.
Yes.
I was in banking and still am.
Okay.
For probably about 50 years. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That's neat.
Anything else? Yes.
I'm gonna be really nosy. Are there any descendants of any of the Titans here tonight?
And since nobody says they are, where are they? Right?
Yeah. Descendants.
Yeah.
And have like a tabletop.
That could be really interesting.
We have ancestry.com here at the library, so you can start looking them up and see if you can find them. And that's, I can say, I've been doing this for a long time. And the technology today, where I can find all this stuff versus what I used to use to be able to find it. So with ancestry.com and familysearch.com and newspapers.com, where you can just search a word and it finds them for you. And we used to sit and look at the microfilm machines and just, you might know close to a date when something happened and you just had to sit there and reel through it and try to find it. But now with the things that are online, you just type in the word and it finds it for you. So it's made it easier to delve into all this.
Wasn't that Fred Nixon that did the walking tours?
Yes, he's good, yeah. I haven't heard, Fred Nixon, he hasn't done a walking tour.
Fred Miller.
I don't know.
Fred Miller.
Oh, Fred Miller.
He's passed away.
Fred
Russ Volker
And
took
Russ Volker has done some too, right, right. Well, let's thank Kim for all her searching. And sharing, right? And you know, I have papers up here for the different programs coming, but let me say one more program that, because I think, you know, we have now a Tuscarawas County Sports Hall of Fame. And there's going to be a program in June, I'm gonna say the third weekend of June, June 18th, I think it is. There's going to be an induction ceremony of people who are living, and there's also going to be a ceremony for people who have passed away already. I apologize for not having the exact details, but I do know one specific detail for sure. Lois Youngin, who is the young woman who was born in near Gregersville, who was a ball player with the All-American Female Baseball League, right? She's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and then she's coming on Monday night to this very room to talk to us about her, you know, how she started out and her life. She has a very interesting life. She went from Ohio to Oregon, and she put in, she has a whole career there, and she's gonna come back and tell us all about it. And that's pretty historical. I reached out to all the softball coaches in the region and said, get your young women here. This is a historical figure, you know. We'll see who shows up. You can show up, that would be great. And drag some of your granddaughters, great-granddaughters, neighbor girls, you know, girl power, okay? All right, well, thanks again, Kim, and thank you all for coming.